Weasels in a Box, Book 3, Chapter 3. Chapter 3, in which you yearn for simpler days. You pound downward against the strings. The arm begins to solidify. A pain starts burning from the shoulder down to the wrist. Your ass is vibrating. You try to steady yourself by twisting your feet around the legs of the stool. The loudness of the music thumps. It has to be loud to feel the part. To create that live sound, you slide off the stool and fall to the ground. You lay there with a guitar on top of you. Your head is hanging down off a step. Max looks at Muddle. Muddle looks at you. There's no longer room or time for unproductive and misguided anger. You have just downstroked yourself off a stool. That is pretty funny. You start laughing. Look at me. I fell down. Max and Muddle laugh a hole through their building impatience and sleeplessness. Everyone is relieved for a few moments. It is stressful, but it is still good to be back in the studio. It is good to be back with these people. These are the friends that you have missed. You wish Franklin enjoyed these moments still. It seems odd to miss this man who is packed full of venom and anxiety, but Franklin has an irresistibly funny, mean streak that can both create and break the ice. He is one of the few people that can make you both mad and happy at the same time. Like when he and Vittles were driving the band's first tour van from Wisconsin to Chicago, Franklin and you had just purchased it for $300. It made it onto the driveway back home in the Chicago suburbs, but from there it never moved on its own again. There was a clicking sound in the engine, and the tailpipe was spitting out enough oil to coat the front window of Mr. Famous's Malibu, which you were driving while following them back to Chicago. That should have made a quick and inevitable breakdown obvious. But the two of you knew absolutely nothing about automobiles. You both wanted to believe that the old coot selling it was an honest man. The two of you were always looking for honesty, trying to find it here and there, so you didn't have to teach yourselves how to do everything. It's impossible to do everything. There's not enough time to learn how everything works. You just wanted people to tell the truth and stand by their word. The windshield wipers were coated with oil. They struggled as they flapped back and forth like ducks caught in the waves of a sea tanker's oil spill. Through the streaks of black, you could see a toll booth approaching. You looked down into the Malibu's change dispenser. There was nothing in it. My God, you were 23 or 24 years old, and you had never been. You reached into your pocket, but you had spent every last penny on the purchase of the van. What does someone do in this sort of situation? You rolled down the window and screamed out for help like the lovable fool in Martin and Lewis's films. Franklin! Help! Franklin! They heard you screaming. What could they do? Was there any way they could have helped? If they would have stopped the van in the middle of the expressway, they could have been hit from behind. They could have pulled over, but the damn oil-spewing van might not have started again. Did they even have any change? These are the questions and possible reasons that circulated through your brain while sitting at the toll booth with no money. You got out of the car, walked over to a city worker, and asked what to do. A slew of various automobiles lined up behind the Malibu and began honking. It was a mess. The city worker handed you an envelope and asked you to send the local government a check for 40 cents. You never did. A check for 40 cents? That didn't seem right. These are the questions, possible solutions, and desperate actions that kept you from laughing at that time. It is quite funny when you think about it now. Mr. Famous and Vittles laughed at your expense and got a kick out of imitating your voice when you all arrived back home with a van that would stop working 2 days later. It actually sat in my driveway for quite a long time until we had it towed away and made $50. Hopeless situations often look and sound funny. It is a memory that each of you remembers vividly and often look back on and laugh. But the shared laughter doesn't come from the event as much as it does from the retelling, with Franklin's characteristic exaggerations accompanied by some bizarre cartoon-like imitations of Vittles. It is hilarious. The story was retold to Muddle as you all crammed into the Malibu on your way across the United States, leaving the oil-spewed van in your mom's driveway. You were embarrassed and a little pissed off at their heartless imitations, but you laughed because it is healthy to laugh at yourself, and because the band members were all together about to embark on something that most people just dream of doing. stuck together for hours at a stretch, entertaining yourselves by creating jokes, making all absurdities and temporary hardships laughable. And then after the Malibu tour, Vittles and Franklin had a falling out. It was rumored that Vittles told Muddle that Franklin was going to kick them out, so they both left the band. But a few months later, Muddle told Franklin what Vittles had said. It was untrue. Franklin had said nothing of that kind. Vittles just said that so that you would spend more time on your side project. I don't fucking care if you have another project going on, as long as you're responsible and attentive to this band, said Franklin. That's actually when Vermin and Vapid were doing Sludgeworth. Muddle rejoined the band, and Vittles was replaced by Dread, Dread being Panic. And Dread's friend Hardy Laughley, that's Dave Naked. Hardy Laughley took over bass, and Muddle moved to guitar. Quickly after recording a record with that lineup, it was discovered that a large percentage of the band couldn't deal with the personality of Laughley. So Muddle moved back to bass, and Laughley was moved out the door. Dave was actually not a really bad guy. He was actually, years later we didn't become friends, but we hung out a little bit more. And I think it was just that he just didn't really fit in with the band quite right. Dread was discovered in an opening band that had played Semi-Famous's last show. His drumming was incredible. What's the name of that band? Ivy League, I think. Yeah. Franklin he was in the band with actually Gub, my guitarist now, Gub Conway, who was in Even the Blackouts and also was toured with the Weasel for a while. Franklin, he does show up in this book, that's right, as Gub. Yes. Franklin made a mental note to ask this guy to play for the next band, which happened to be the same band, only later. With the new lineup, Semi-Famous was the first act signed to Duck Records outside of Berkeley, California. You, Franklin, Famous, Dread, and Muddle had become the public's favorite incarnation. For some, it was the only incarnation that mattered. For others, it was the only incarnation familiar to them. It was the grouping that lasted the longest and who appeared on the most distributed records. Even to you, the lineup seemed to be right, or at least it had showed signs of a more permanent congealing. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that was true at this point, but later on, I think Mass and Lumley probably outpassed the length of being in the band, or at least to, probably. The band was at its peak, so when this incarnation forged its way into inspirational, influential history, it magnified the anxieties and skewed the band's common ground until the walls of the world boxed the four of you in and made an explosion more likely. But as long as the band held the ability to look at themselves and laugh just a little, there's always a chance of survival. It is important for band members to laugh at themselves. It keeps vanities in check. It is also very important to look upon yourselves in a serious light. A band needs that dichotomy. Semi-Famous thrives on the humorous and idealistic. It's what makes you guys important, if not to the fans, to each other and yourselves. You look up to the studio console and say, "It isn't like that anymore. I have just appeared. For a moment, because you have called me here, you are speaking to me, not to Max or Muddle. I am sitting on the console, looking down at you on the floor, listening intently. I am walking next to you as we head back to the club in Boston. You scratch your head and mess up your hair. You get back up on the stool, reach down to the floor for your pick, pinch it between your fingers, and place it in the ready position, against the strings above the pickups. Max waits for the signal. You nod and start over again." End of chapter 3. Chapter 4 of Weasels in a Box. Chapter 4, in which you reveal deeply embedded hostility. 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 Chapter 4, in which you reveal deeply embedded hostility. There we are. You were angry at all of them, but still felt strong friendship and allegiance to each, individually. Over the time throughout the recording of this reunion album, you were told stories of grievances that contradicted each other, and at times it felt like they were exaggerating their interpretation of events so that you could pick a side. But there were no sides. You were angry at all of them, but sat upon the anger knowing that it would dissipate and seem ridiculous when distance was put in the way. Just in case you don't know where we are right now, that's talking about same thing where the downstroke thing happened, but it's where we got back together after the breakup and we were working on Bark Like a Dog, and then we left Lookout to go to Fat Records. I think I might talk about that in this chapter or the next. So what we're talking about here is when Vapid, Panic, and Ben were in Riverdale's, and then we reformed Weasel from the aftermath of that experience. Dredd said, "It was so boring on the road with them. Franklin was just downright mean, and everything that went wrong he blamed on us. He said we were the only ones that wanted to go on a tour with BC Pills. Of course I wanted to go, but he did too. Every time something went wrong, he threw that back on our faces. It was our fault we were here, miserable. It was our fault that we weren't getting enough attention in interviews. I had more fun hanging out with BC Pills. They would let me jam with them during the sound check. I mostly just kept to myself. I'll never tour again. That was by far the worst time of my life. Nothing my dad ever did could top that shit I was just put through. Nothing my dad ever did could top the shit I was just put through. It's less tense with you around." I don't know if Panic actually said that, but there were stories told to me that I sort of compiled together into that. Once again, this is why this is kind of fiction, and like I talked about the dialogue being 80% fictitious, because there were things like that said to me and around me, but I don't think Panic actually ever said it was good to have me back. He might have. I can't remember. Now it's farther away. Franklin said, "It's good to be back together again. I just can't stop writing semi-famous songs. Maybe now we can get something fucking done." He plays a few notes on his guitar and then stops. You sit for a moment in silence. "You know, those bozos were ecstatic when you were gone. They both said that it felt good to have their mother off their backs. They complained about your sarcasm and said that you were often very hurtful and rude to them on tour. They didn't realize all the work that you had to be done. I tried to set the Derivatives up as a democracy, but they wouldn't take responsibility for anything. I told them that touring with BC Pills was an accident waiting to happen, but they didn't listen to my warnings, and in 2-1 vote, we made the decision to take part in the painful debacle that they called a good career move." Who knows if this was true? But why was he telling you this now? It hurt to hear of their hostilities, but that didn't last long. It failed in comparison to the unanswered question of why Franklin was telling you this now, in the midst of recording a reunion album during the mega cultivation of pop-punk music into the mainstream. Muddle said not much. He wasn't one for speaking about problems. He occasionally complained about Dredd's embarrassing kiss-ass schmoozing of other more well-known punk bands, and his subversive but obvious plan to be the replacement drummer for BC Pills. This complaint was universal and petty compared to what seemed to be going on in all their minds. Once again, that actually was said to me, and I think Panic and I had it out a little, I think a couple years ago, where I sort of apologized for some of this, but yeah, I think I wrote in a long letter that these are just things I heard. It wasn't my opinion. So I don't think we ever came to a full reconciliation about that, but we get along pretty well now. There was information going around that involved him that he was not yet aware of, and this weirdness was apparent in his face without him even knowing it existed. During the same time as the Derivatives were functioning, Franklin produced a Flaming Faggots record in which Muddle and Dredd were guest musicians. As producer, Mr. Famous wanted Joey to return to the old faggot simple sound of one guitarist, Joey on vocals and guitar, one bassist, Z-Face, and one drummer, on this record, Dredd. Joey wanted Muddle to play on the record, especially since Muddle had helped write a good share of the parts. Muddle recorded all the songs without him knowing. The decision was made to remove his tracks from the record and not give him royalties. Muddle was never told and didn't find out until after his last semi-famous record, when he noticed one random day that he was not getting royalties for the aforementioned session. Actually, this is one of the parts that I did actually let Vapid read before I printed it. And once again, in his quiet way, he didn't really say anything back to me, but he didn't say it wasn't true. So I left it in. Like the complicated and confused chain of command in a government decision, all parties involved in this decision had valid reasons for justifying why this went down. Lester, Franklin, Joey, and Max. No matter what the reason, it is a sad but true fact that Muddle was never informed and walked amongst these friends with a secret kept hidden. During the reunion album, all sat together in the rehearsal space, in the recording studio, on the plane to California, and at the negotiations in Lester's office with these secrets in each other's heads. And you knew none of the unbiased reasons or any undeniable facts in regards to these secrets at the time. But the mistrust and unbearable minutes of tense silence were screaming something discordant. End of chapter 4. Thank you!
Thank you for listening to these videos of me. We're wrapping it up, getting near the end. If you could please remember to join my Patreon and let me know what kind of project you want me to do next. You can also give a one-time donation to Jughead's Basement. I'm very excited about what's coming up with Jughead's Basement. We have the Smoking Popes, and I'm looking into a couple other bands like Sloppy Seconds and also the Fastbacks. So, thank you very much, and please give me a donation. Yep.